Gas cars didn't suddenly become unreliable. What changed is something most owners never think about until it's too late. The real risk today isn't switching too early. It's holding on while the math quietly turns against you. For decades, gas cars didn't win because they were cheap. They won because they felt controllable. You knew how they aged. You understood the maintenance. You could roughly predict what they'd be worth when you were done with them. That familiarity created confidence. A Toyota Camry, a Honda CR-V, a Ford F-150. These weren't just vehicles, they were financial routines. Buy used, drive a few years, handle the basics, sell without drama. Even when fuel prices moved around or repairs popped up, owners trusted that resale would balance things out in the end. That trust mattered more than numbers on paper. Because when costs feel predictable, people don't see risk, they see normal. And here's the key point most owners miss. That sense of control wasn't built on the cars themselves. It was built on stable assumptions around fuel, maintenance timing, and steady buyer demand. Those assumptions are now quietly shifting. Not enough to cause panic. Not enough to change how the car drives. But enough to weaken the safety net gas cars have relied on for years. And once that safety net starts to stretch, the ownership equation changes, even if nothing under the hood does. Fuel used to be the simplest part of gas car ownership. Not cheap, just predictable. You expected prices to move, but within a range you could absorb. Fill-ups blended into the background, and over time, they felt manageable. That's what made fuel feel like a cost, not a risk. That distinction no longer holds. Take a mid-size sedan or crossover driven about 12,000 miles per year. At average efficiency, that vehicle burns roughly 430 to 450 gallons annually. When fuel sits near $3, ownership feels stable. When it creeps past 4, nothing breaks, but the math changes fast. Over 5 years, small price swings quietly stack into several $1,000s without warning. The key problem isn't the average price. It's the spread. Fuel doesn't just move up and down. It stretches the range of possible outcomes. One owner gets through 5 years comfortably. Another, driving the same car, absorbs thousands more simply because the timing worked against them. Larger vehicles magnify this exposure. Trucks and full-size SUVs turn volatility into a real financial variable. Over a long ownership window, fuel alone can swing by an amount that rivals expected depreciation, and that was never part of the old mental model. This is where control starts slipping. Because fuel risk comes from outside the vehicle. You can't maintain it away. You can't plan it precisely. And once fuel becomes an open-ended variable instead of a known expense, gas ownership stops feeling as stable as it used to. Maintenance is the part of gas car ownership most people think they understand best. Oil changes, brake pads, tires, fluids. The basics feel routine, almost reassuring. For years, that routine reinforced the idea that gas cars were manageable long-term assets. You could plan for upkeep, budget for wear items, and trust that nothing would arrive all at once. That confidence holds early in ownership. It starts to weaken once mileage climbs past a certain point. Between roughly 60,000 and 80,000 miles, the maintenance profile of a gas vehicle changes. Costs don't necessarily spike in a single dramatic moment. Instead, they begin to cluster. Components that aged quietly in the background now demand attention within the same window. Suspension parts, cooling system components, driveline services, emissions-related systems, and electronic sensors often reach the end of their predictable lifespan around the same time. This is where planning becomes harder. A mid-size sedan like a Toyota Camry or Honda Accord might average $800 to $1,000 per year in maintenance during this phase. That includes routine service plus periodic repairs that are no longer optional. Crossovers such as the CR-V or RAV4 tend to push higher, often crossing $1,100 annually as weight, suspension complexity, and all-wheel drive systems add wear points. Trucks and larger SUVs move into a different category altogether, where $1,300 to $1,600 per year becomes common as mileage accumulates. What matters most isn't the dollar figure. It's the timing. These costs arrive precisely when owners lose flexibility. Early in ownership, you can choose when to sell. Later on, selling means accepting weaker resale, while keeping the vehicle means absorbing higher maintenance. That squeeze didn't matter as much in the past because resale demand remained strong enough to offset the risk. Today, that buffer is thinner. Modern gas vehicles are also more complex than their older counterparts. Advanced driver assistance systems, turbocharged engines, multi-speed transmissions, and tighter emissions controls improve efficiency and performance, but they also introduce more failure points over time. Repairs don't just cost more, they're harder to predict. A single sensor or module failure can sideline a vehicle and turn into a four-figure expense without warning. This creates a new kind of uncertainty. Maintenance stops being a steady line item and becomes a series of decision points. Do you repair and hope nothing else follows? Do you sell now and accept a discount? Or do you wait and risk stacking repairs later, when resale conditions may be even softer? Over a 5 to 7 year ownership window, that uncertainty compounds. Two owners of the same model, driven the same number of miles, can exit ownership with dramatically different total costs depending on when repairs clustered and how the market looked at that moment. That's the break from the past. Gas cars don't become unreliable machines. They become harder to forecast. And when ownership costs stop being evenly distributed and start arriving in waves, the sense of control that once defined gas car ownership begins to erode, quietly, but decisively. The real turning point in gas car ownership doesn't happen while you're driving the vehicle. It happens when you try to leave it. For decades, resale was the hidden safety net that made everything else tolerable. Fuel could fluctuate. Maintenance could arrive in clusters. Owners accepted those risks because they believed demand at the end would be there. As long as someone else wanted the car, the numbers worked. That confidence is now weakening. Look at the used market behavior over the past few years. Vehicles that once sold quickly at predictable price points are taking longer to move. A 5 or 6-year-old mid-size sedan or crossover with average mileage used to attract serious interest within the first 2 weeks. Today, similar listings increasingly sit for a month or longer before meaningful offers appear. That delay matters more than most people realize. When a car doesn't sell quickly, sellers lose leverage. The first price cut is usually small, often a few $100s, just enough to refresh the listing. If interest stays weak, the next adjustment is larger. By the time serious buyers engage, the vehicle has already been repositioned lower in the market. What looks like a gradual negotiation often ends as a sudden loss of value. On higher-priced gas vehicles, the effect is amplified. A used truck or full-size SUV priced in the high 20s or low 30s faces a more cautious buyer pool. These buyers are highly sensitive to fuel costs, future maintenance, and long-term relevance. When uncertainty rises, they protect themselves early by demanding bigger discounts. Sellers often absorb $2,000 to $3,000 in price reductions not because the vehicle changed, but because expectations did. This is the critical shift. Resale is no longer anchored only to condition and mileage. It's anchored to perceived risk. Buyers now compare gas vehicles not just against other gas vehicles, but against alternative ownership paths. Even buyers who never plan to own an EV still factor its presence into their decision-making. If a lower uncertainty option exists, now or soon, gas vehicles must compensate by being cheaper upfront. That compensation shows up at resale. What makes this painful is how late owners notice it. While driving the car, nothing feels different. Maintenance feels manageable. Fuel feels annoying but tolerable. The market shift remains invisible until the moment ownership ends. By then, sellers are negotiating from a weaker position, often competing against both newer gas models and future EV expectations at the same time. This isn't a collapse. It's a slow repricing. And slow repricing is dangerous because it doesn't trigger urgency. Owners wait, hoping conditions improve. Buyers wait, knowing leverage is on their side. Transactions slow, price cuts deepen, and value erodes quietly. This is why resale absorbs the impact first, and why gas car owners often pay for the shift before they ever realize it's happening. Most people assume EVs only matter if you plan to own one. That assumption is outdated. EVs influence the gas car market long before they appear in someone's driveway. They do it by changing what buyers expect ownership should look like over time. Once a new reference point exists, every alternative is judged against it, even by buyers who have no intention of switching. This is where gas car resale quietly feels pressure from the outside. When a buyer looks at a used gas vehicle today, they're no longer asking only, "Is this reliable?" They're also asking, "How exposed am I over the next 5 to 7 years?" That question didn't used to matter because all options carried similar uncertainty. Now, that symmetry is gone. EVs introduce a different ownership profile, fewer moving parts, more stable energy costs, maintenance that tends to be flatter over time instead of peaking late. Whether or not a buyer wants an EV, the existence of that profile changes how risk is priced. Gas cars now need to justify themselves. That justification doesn't come from features or performance. It comes from price. To compensate for higher exposure to fuel swings, maintenance clustering, and resale uncertainty, gas vehicles must offer a clearer financial discount. If they don't, buyers hesitate. And hesitation is what softens demand. This effect compounds at resale. A seller isn't competing only against similar gas vehicles. They're competing against the idea that an alternative path might be safer, even if the buyer never takes it. The mere presence of that alternative forces a comparison. When the comparison favors predictability, gas vehicles lose leverage. What makes this shift powerful is that it doesn't require mass adoption. It only requires belief. Once buyers believe there is a lower-risk ownership option available now or soon, they adjust their behavior. They negotiate harder. They wait longer. They demand more margin for uncertainty. Each of those behaviors pushes gas car prices down without any headline event driving it. This is why resale pressure arrives unevenly. Some models hold value better than others. Some sellers exit cleanly. Others get caught in the middle, watching demand thin out while costs continue to accumulate. The market doesn't punish all gas cars at once. It selectively reprices risk. And this is where Tesla's role becomes impossible to ignore. Because Tesla isn't just adding another vehicle to the market. It's changing how long buyers believe a platform remains financially relevant. And once relevance stretches, the economics of gas ownership start to unravel, even for people who never planned to switch. Tesla's real disruption isn't about acceleration, screens, or even autonomy. It's about time. For most of automotive history, the assumed relevance window for a vehicle platform was relatively short. Buyers expected meaningful obsolescence within 5 to 6 years. Even reliable gas cars followed this rhythm. After a certain point, resale softened, maintenance rose, and ownership became a game of diminishing returns. Tesla's battery strategy stretches that timeline. Newer battery platforms aren't positioned as short-term advantages. They're designed to preserve usefulness and confidence deeper into ownership. Longer cycle life, slower degradation curves, and software-driven optimization change how long buyers believe the vehicle remains viable. That belief matters more than any single technical specification. Perception sets value. When buyers believe an EV platform can remain competitive for 8, 9, or even 10 years, resale math changes immediately. The vehicle doesn't need to be perfect at year 8. It only needs to feel relevant. That extended relevance compresses uncertainty and lifts confidence at the end of ownership. This is where gas cars struggle to respond. Their technology doesn't degrade faster, but their comparison point shifts. A gas vehicle bought today is still judged against a 5 to 7 year horizon, where fuel exposure and maintenance clustering remain unresolved. An EV built on a newer battery platform is judged against a longer horizon with fewer unknowns. The result is a narrowing of downside risk on one side and a widening range on the other. Over a 7-year ownership window, a typical gas vehicle may see fuel and maintenance costs vary by several $1,000s depending on timing and market conditions. An EV's total operating cost range is tighter. Electricity pricing moves slowly. Maintenance lacks large late-stage spikes. That doesn't always make EVs cheaper on average. It makes them safer financially. And safety is what resale markets reward. Buyers don't need to understand battery chemistry to respond to this shift. They just need to believe the platform won't age out quickly. Once that belief takes hold, even a modest difference in expected retained value can outweigh years of higher upfront cost. This is why Tesla's battery strategy matters beyond Tesla buyers. It resets the benchmark for longevity. It changes what normal ownership looks like. And it pushes gas vehicles into a position where they must discount uncertainty rather than compete on familiarity. Gas cars don't disappear because they fail. They lose ground because the timeline moves, and they don't move with it. And that's why many owners won't feel the impact until they try to exit ownership, when the market has already adjusted. Here's the subtle danger. Most gas car owners never feel this shift while driving. The car behaves exactly as it always has. Oil changes, brake replacements, tire rotations, all normal. Fuel pumps still accept your card. Performance remains familiar. On the surface, nothing seems different. That's what makes the financial risk so invisible. The real problem doesn't appear in the garage or at the gas station. It appears at the point of sale, when you try to convert your vehicle back into cash. That's when the math hits. Cars that used to sell within weeks now linger on the market. Days on market creep from 2 weeks to 3, 4, sometimes 5. At first, owners don't notice. It feels like a slow week. Then small price cuts begin. $500 here, $1,000 there. By the time a serious offer arrives, the cumulative loss may already reach $2,000 or more. And this isn't tied to wear, mileage, or reliability. It's tied to market perception and shifting risk expectations. Larger or higher-priced vehicles amplify the effect. Full-size trucks and SUVs, which once commanded stable resale values, now face buyers factoring fuel, maintenance, and alternative ownership paths into their calculations. A seller might need to drop $3,000 just to compete with the risk-adjusted expectations set by EV alternatives, even if the buyer never plans to own one. Timing makes the impact worse. Most owners wait too long to sell because the vehicle still drives perfectly. They hold, hoping conditions improve, but the market has already shifted. By the time they try to exit, leverage is gone. The difference between perceived value and actual market behavior is already baked in. This delayed realization is what makes gas car ownership quietly riskier today. Owners feel no threat while driving, yet pay the price at the exact moment they expected security. And this is where Tesla's battery strategy becomes critical. By extending the perceived relevance of EVs and narrowing long-term cost uncertainty, it creates a comparison point gas vehicles simply cannot match. When buyers see a lower-risk option that remains viable longer, the traditional, safe, ownership model of gas cars starts to collapse, quietly, invisibly, without a single regulation or mandate forcing the change. The worst part? Most owners only understand what happened after it's already too late. The story isn't about gas cars failing. It isn't about EVs magically taking over. It's about something far subtler. Financial predictability moving from one side of the equation to the other. For decades, gas cars felt safe because owners could anticipate costs and rely on resale. Fuel and maintenance weren't perfect, but the combination of familiarity and steady demand created a buffer. That buffer is eroding, not because the cars are worse, but because the context around them has changed. Ownership math is stretching, exposure is rising, and the very foundation of what made these vehicles safe no longer holds. Tesla's battery strategy accelerates this shift. By extending perceived relevance, reducing long-term variability, and offering a narrower cost range over 7 to 10 years, EVs redefine what buyers see as predictable ownership. Gas vehicles haven't changed, but the market measures them differently. That difference shows up most clearly at resale, where timing, leverage, and perceived risk collide. This isn't hype. It's math. And it's quiet. No headlines, no bans, no sudden shock. By the time most owners realize it, the safest choice has already shifted. Holding a gas car isn't inherently dangerous. It's just no longer the path with the fewest financial surprises. For anyone weighing whether to hold, wait, or move on, understanding this shift is crucial. Predictable costs, long-term maintenance, resale confidence. These are now the variables that decide what makes a car safe to own. And once you see the numbers, the safest decision becomes clear. In the next video, we'll break down the 5-year cost of owning a Tesla Model 2, step by step, no opinions, no hype, and show why those numbers reshape how buyers think about risk, resale, and timing. If this kind of analysis helps you make smarter ownership decisions, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every new subscriber helps Auto Gear Shift keep delivering practical, no-nonsense breakdowns instead of hype. Because in today's market, understanding the quiet shifts can save thousands, long before they ever appear at the gas pump or repair shop.